at all that money, yeah, the money that they spent. Take another look now and take some time for hemp. I don't cut trees for paper, cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yeah, it's time for hemp. Whoa, an acre of hemp makes 20 barrels of oil. No need for pesticides to poison all our soil. People got no food, they got no clothes, they got no rent. Well, right now it's time for hemp.
Happy Tuesday. It is time for Hemp. Good morning. This is Casper-Leitch. You are listening to the live broadcast at Time for Hemp all around the world at timeforhemp.com, Tumblr, SoundCloud, iTunes, and of course, iHeartRadio. It rocks to be part of the iHeart family. We are the only all-cannabis network on iHeartRadio. And like a good joint, we are best when shared with friends. And today is Tuesday. On Tuesdays, we like to put a spotlight on the hardworking people up in Canada. And helping me do that today is my American joint host.
That's it.
Michael Krawitz. Normally, we have Kriston from KDK Distributors on as the joint host. And I don't know, maybe they're having a holiday in Canada. But I haven't been able to find Kelly or his team, so I think they're having a day off up there. And we still want to put a spotlight on the amazing activists who are doing so much work in Canada. They have led the way for so long until they got a handful of ass clowns into Parliament. And then these past few years, oh my God, the leaders of Canada have tried to undo so much good, and these activists in Canada just stand right up there and say, excuse me, but we need our medical marijuana. My joint host today and guest is Michael Krawitz. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Casper. Great to be here.
It rocks. I tell you, first of all, a lot of people know you from your hard work at the Veterans for Medical Cannabis. And for those of you who are listening, you can go to Veterans for Medical Cannabis, all one word, .org. And you find a lot of great news there and what's going on. And before we get a chance to cover the Canadian scene, why don't you let people know some of the successes we've been having for veterans and medical marijuana in the U.S.?
Well, it's been a really exciting time. It's been almost impossible to keep up for me. You know, I'm a disabled vet and do this as volunteer work. You know, I wasn't expecting to be so successful and have it take up so much of my time, you know, but I'm not going to complain about that. We're not going to complain about our success, are we, Casper?
No, I remember when Chris Conrad first introduced you to the network and to this show. I think I was listening to the first interview we did a few weeks back when I was going through the archives. And at that time, you were just hoping beyond hope to be able to have a medical cannabis available to some veterans in some states for some reasons without them losing their benefits. And you were just actually getting ready to have a big powwow with some of the people in Washington, D.C.
Yep, that was quite a while ago. That would have been about 1997 or 8 or 9, 1997 or so. I would guess. The big conversation worked out quite well. You know, the amazing thing was, you know, like you said, I was thinking at that time, now that you remind me, you know, we were working on case by case basis, and we had a couple of victories. That was kind of where we were at. So we were literally looking at, you know, a vet here, a veteran there that had won some ground inside the system. But yeah, it was really beyond our hope to get the VA to act in an official way. And we owe a debt of gratitude to so many players for that. You know, first one jumps to mind is Steve Fox from Marijuana Policy Project, now working with all the great cannabis industry and everything that he's doing now. I think he may actually even be back with that Marijuana Policy Project in some capacity now as well. And Steve put us together with the New York Times. And it was the New York Times editorial board for their front page that really got the VA to write a policy. Up till then, it was just, some internal discussion that I had that was, produced some good documentation for me to use, maybe for some other veterans to use on a case-by-case basis. But when that became a news story, and the New York Times was going to write about me in that letter, then all of a sudden the VA said, hey, let us go ahead and publish a VA policy, and they did. We had a vote up in Washington, D.C. Every year, I guess, they have to renegotiate the budget for the VA. It's a MilCon VA. It's under, I guess, a whole bunch of military and veterans, all appropriations, all in one big package. Probably how they typically do things in Congress. I really don't follow it that closely. But there was an amendment that was put forth by Congressman Farr, a year ago, to restrict the VA from going after VA doctors that would recommend cannabis. And it was hard to really understand what he was doing at that time. And they redid the language. Congressman Blumenauer picked it up and changed the language and made it much tighter, much more understandable, much clearer that they were actually going after the VA to stop the VA from having any funding to go after doctors that would recommend cannabis, to allow cannabis to be recommended by doctors inside the VA. And this is extraordinary. I really had to learn a lot about this process. I never, thought that was the way things were done. I in my mind, you go to the Veterans Oversight Committee. The Veterans Oversight Committee, has hearings and they make recommendations, and those recommendations are taken by the VA and worked with in a very professional way. That's the fantasy world that I lived in. Well, in the real world, none of that is essentially working worth a darn. That's why we have the big scandals that we have. And if you want to get anything done, you have to pull the purse strings. So that's the world we live in.
Well, man, that's the other thing too. Since the time that you started chipping away at medical marijuana being available to our veterans, now we are finding that we need to make available to our veterans just any kind of care. It looks like in some of these states, veterans have been waiting too long to see doctors, too long to get their medications. They've been over medicated. They have been over prescribed. They've been given horrible care. And it would seem to me that maybe veterans should be allowed to get a voucher for the care, and that the VA cover it. They can just go to a good hospital and get good care.
Yeah, it really is funny because, here we were creating this alternative system for medical marijuana. We didn't realize that we were creating an alternative system that really should be implemented more widely for veterans to get all their health care through, because the system really does fail its vets in many capacities. You have to realize that, and I'm very quick to defend the VA when possible, and I'll defend the VA here in so much as saying that there is some great health care that's delivered through the VA system. The VA system has, I think it's 26 million veterans that it serves. It's a huge system, the biggest healthcare system in the United States, and it does fairly well in most places. Having said that, there's huge infrastructural problems, administrative problems, and they're the very same problems that I ran into with medical marijuana. I mean, look at medical marijuana for an example. I was speaking to doctors at the lowest level, and they were telling me one thing about medical marijuana. And then I was talking to management, the people actually running the VA medical program from the top, the top pain management consultant and the ethics department of the VA, literally up there in Washington, D.C., and they were like in an ivory tower. They didn't know any of this was going on. They would send out a memo that was supposed to be just advice to veterans and doctors on how to handle these opiates. And then the doctors were handling that like it was the written letter of the law. And they were acting in a way that was completely contrary to the point of view of the people up in Washington, D.C. And that was in a good place. That was in a hospital that really had no backlogs. This is in a place where everything's working well. There's this kind of bad communication. There's a disconnect between Washington, D.C. and the VA facilities, flat out. The way the VA works is it's broken up into these things called VISNs, V-I-S-N. and there's, I think, 6 of them. And each one is a huge area. The division that I'm in goes all the way down into North Carolina and Kentucky, Virginia, up into Maryland. It's a massive, massive area. And each one of those has its own politics and its own, structures of command and everything. And all these structures of command have been actually acting quite independently. And the only monitoring that's been done has been done, I guess, in a way that's allowed them to, come up with results that were fraudulent and still be able to get kudos inside the system for a good job.
Well, I'll tell you, you have been a champion of the veterans for as long as I've known you, even when they get a lot of bad press, and I'm quick to jump on the veterans when the bad press comes around, which they've been getting. You have always been quick to defend which, I guess that is true. They do provide a lot. It's just not enough to the
it's the kind of thing that if you got a car that makes it right up to the curb, but then that you can't get from the curb to the car, then the car isn't of much value to you.
Right, exactly.
And that's a lot of veterans have had that experience. I want to give you some news in this first segment here. Washington D.C. And I've got a lot to talk about Canada, too. I want to talk about Canada later. I did a few notes and got my memory back of, work that I did with Chris Clay and the Constitutional Challenge. The epilepsy is at the center of everything going on up there in Canada. And anyway, what's happening down here in Washington, D.C. is we've got the initiative has just received enough votes, enough signatures to get on the ballot, it looks like. The DCMJ campaign submitted 55,000 signatures, and they're hoping to get 22,373 ballots out of 55,000 that they've turned in that they believe are valid. And believe me, they've tried hard to make sure that the ones they've submitted are valid. So that's really interesting. This is a battle in Washington, D.C. The Congress is, like back in the day when we passed medical marijuana in Washington, D.C., remember the Bob Barr Amendment prevented the D.C. initiative from going into place. And now there's new language in a new bill that has been presented that may actually do the same thing. So this is fascinating. Unfolding right now, in Washington, D.C.
Well, and the way our Congress is actually waking up is like, I'm surprised.
Yes, it's a Yes on 71 campaign. I watched a fascinating interview. I wouldn't call it an interview. It's the congressional testimony, congressional hearing is what it is. The House Oversight Committee for the White House. So it's the Congressional Oversight Committee of the White House and the administration's activities. And they've been doing this series of meetings. The chairman is Representative Micah from Florida, who's never been a champion for marijuana. He's been an opponent, and his meetings used to be really hard to tolerate back in the day. And now it's actually almost a joy to watch this hearing because of the fact that we've got some of our information finally being presented in the U.S. Congress. We had a hearing the other day. The hearing is mixed signals. The President Obama administration on medical marijuana or something like that. Mixed signals House hearing. It would be enough for you to find it on Google. And you can watch the whole thing on video. It's awesome. We had Professor Hart, who's a scientist, present testimony on behalf of the truth, on behalf of our side, and then on their side we had Nora Volkow, who presented testimony, and she's from the National Institute of Drug Abuse, and also a doctor representing the Food and Drug Administration. And the hearing, it's just fantastic to hear Congressman Cohen get up there and just shred these guys, and Congressman Blumenauer and others, just really presenting some information and getting some questions in, and someone like Professor Hart, who's able to counter some of the ridiculous spin that these guys are putting forward. Absolutely ridiculous spin. What Nora Volkow will say is, there's 9% of people will become addicted to marijuana. And she just says that in a vacuum. She doesn't compare it to anything. Professor Hart, notates the fact that that's a very low number. The same thing with, this other person said something, one of the congressmen said something about some study that was done that talked about IQ rates. And Professor Hart was quick to note that if you look at the big picture, that change in IQ rate that they're talking about still falls within the normal range. So it's still a normal person. They forgot to mention that part.
Well, they do overlook that fact occasionally in a lot of avenues they explore.
Yeah, it's just really, really. I have to say that Nora Volkow agreed that that was just one study and it was an IQ thing that was interesting, but it wasn't of great value. So there were some things that she said that were actually you could almost say were factual or fair. But the thing is that in the end, Congressman Cohen had to really pin her down and really, really corner her for her to admit that really medical marijuana should never have been put in her care, and that she doesn't really understand the history of why it was there, but now it's there under NIDA's authority, and they're just not medical marijuana people, and they're just not likely to ever approve of us using medical marijuana. And I think that was kind of the takeaway from that meeting.
Well, and I can't help but think sometimes that those particular politicians and or people who are sitting in those particular offices keep themselves deliberately ignorant. I mean, they go out of their way not to learn.
I think it must be ivory tower, because I really feel like the chair or the head of the ethics committee in the VA, for example, his heart was most definitely in the right place. And he had no idea that veterans were being forced to make choices like the ones that I was bringing to his attention. They just don't live in our world. It reminds me of the politician that had no idea how much a loaf of bread costs.
Well, I understand they don't live in our world, but when you are forced to deal with a topic on a regular basis and vote for a topic and be aware of a topic, you have to research that. I mean, when they're asked to make a decision on weapons expansion or cutting a budget for a new type of weapon, or for soldier uniforms, or for soldier shoes, or if we're going to go into the European theater with another 300 soldiers, you stop and you research the shit out of it before you go to Congress as a Congress member or as a member of the Senate, when you go to the Senate, to vote on this shit. So if someone's going to have to bring to you, a member of Congress, something about medical marijuana, maybe the first 4 or 5 times you're ignorant to the facts. Maybe in 1937 and 1960 and the early 1970s, you're ignorant to the facts. But now that so much literature has been written, so many TV shows have been covered, so much information has been put out there, so much information is found on Google research, so many doctors have talked about it, so many people have protested about it. For somebody to walk out their front door and say out loud that there is no medical value to this plant, for them to walk out their door and say out loud, we need to keep this outlawed as an industrial crop, and for them to say out loud that to use this as a recreational substance is a way of coming out their front doors and saying out loud, I'm stupid, I'm deliberately uninformed, and I don't care what the world thinks about my stupidity. That's just my opinion.
Well, I think that's pretty fair to say. If you're willfully ignorant. It's a pretty harsh thing in my mind to be willfully ignorant, and you have to be pretty willfully ignorant not to see some of the, even Kevin Sabet has seen some of the truth and had to concede to it. The FDA presented testimony as well, as I said, and they talked about kind of a split brain thing that they're doing. On one side, they approve medicines. And what that means is you come to them with a new drug application. I don't think it matters what it is. And it's got to be definable. And then you have tests and you go through the rigmarole. You get it approved. And then that is an approved medicine. And it can be just the slightest variation off from another one that already exists. Mm-hmm. A different... aspirin with a different buffering. You know what I mean?
Right.
They'll consider it a different drug. And then on the other side, they have what they call an 8-point test, where they take marijuana and they put it before this 8-point test, which I think actually, if I remember correctly, was resolved from Bob Randall's fight and their court battle is where they came up with the 8 points. But anyway, it all seems to hinge on this accepted medical use. And after being pinned down again in these questions, we got to take away that what they think is accepted medical use is only the drugs that went through that aforementioned process. So, all this use out there in society means nothing to them. We could basically have every last molecule separately in cannabis being approved as a medicine, all of them being sold in some spray or some tonic or some potion, and yet have that very same tonic or potion in a Harborside drawn from the entire plant, and they'll consider it illegal because marijuana is dangerous, even though, like I said, they'll break down everything in the plant, and somehow none of that information is taken into consideration when they look at marijuana. It's fascinating.
Well, let me take some information into consideration, and that is time for a commercial break. Pay our bills. Remind people just how groovy it is to have a network that's all about cannabis. And if you like what we're doing, go to the websites of our sponsors and let them know that you heard about them here on Time for Hemp. You are listening to the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. Please share us with your friends.
THCF Medical Clinics are the premier physicians clinic in the United States. THCF has offices all across the United States from Hawaii to Michigan. THCF Medical Clinics has helped approximately 150,000 patients obtain their medical marijuana permits to legally possess, grow, and use medical marijuana. If you have chronic pain, multiple sclerosis, or any other neurological degenerative disease, or if you have any gastrointestinal disorders such as GERD, irritable bowel syndrome, or if you have AIDS, cancer, spastic disorders, seizure disorders, or glaucoma, call us at 1-800-723-0188 or visit us online at hemp.org. Again, the number is 1-800-723-0188 and the site is hemp.org.
In need of a ganja vacation? Blaze away.
Don't criticize it.
Hotbox Jamaica. Chill.
Legalize it, yeah.
Relax. And burn all day while watching the amazing ocean view. Listen to the birds. Bathe in the mineral waters of the Ganja River. Munch on tasty Jamaican Rasta food. Take a weed farm tour and hold a meditation. Book this amazing vacation for $420. Get the Sativa Special. 7 nights in Sativa dorms with ganja meals and airport transfer. Check us out at hotboxjamaica.com. That's hotboxjamaica.com. Hotbox Jamaica, a higher meditation vacation.
Indigrow is your source for affordable induction grow lighting. First discovered in 1891 by Nikola Tesla, Indigrow lights deliver 11 years of electronic sunlight to your plants. Indigrow lamps require less than half the power of traditional HID lamps. Converting to Indigrow lights means you'll cut down on your power bill with less lighting. Indigrow lamps also use 5 times less mercury than traditional fluorescent or HID lamps, making Indigrow not only energy efficient but environmentally friendly as well. No more switching out lamps between vegetative and flowering stages. As nature intended, your lights get a steady dose of UV light that makes your plants grow healthier and stronger. Indigrow products are manufactured in San Diego, California, and come with a written 10-year warranty. What Tesla knew, then growers know now, is that Indigrow lighting is the cost-effective addition to your victory garden. To learn more or order now, go to inda-grow.com. That's INDA-GRO.com, or call 877-452-2244 to answer any of your questions. These guys really know lights. Indigrow really is your sunlight in a box.
Education and information. See what all the buzz is all about. It's time for hemp. It's time for hemp.
Violence over what politicians can shove it up there. As you know, we're trying to make a change by showing everyone that inside we're all the same. Forget about race, forget about your color, and eye for an eye, just love one another. It's not that hard. Well, our world is crazy. Our world is too It's like this, we'll fight for your rights. Stay hyped, live for the times you wish you could have seen twice. Get it right the first time, watch out for the fine line. Most punishment is never even really worth the crime. Yo, well life flies while you grow, so don't die young man, but never get old. I said moments like these right here, yo. I said what I live for, what I live for. A time when we can be one, as we were when we were first created. Come together as the new generation. Oh, what a sensation. Yo, don't get left out, but don't let it down. Get ready, cause this shit's about to get heavy. Hemp Street rhythms in your face, coming at you right now. Come on! Challenge all of you to make a difference. I challenge all of you. I challenge all of you. I challenge all of you, oh, to make a change. I challenge all of you. I challenge all of you. I challenge all of you, oh, to make a difference.
And we pick up that challenge here at the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. If we ever had a theme song for the network, that would be it. That was Hemp Street Rhythms, and I came across that about, I can't tell you how long ago. Fell in love with the tune. I like the message. It's positive, and it's true. We need to make a difference. I get so fed up with people who say, I can't do anything. I'm just one little person. I'm just all by my little self. What can I do? I think I'll just sit here and watch Frasier reruns and see if him and Niles ever get married. It's like, really? One person can make a lot of difference. Ever watch Horton Hears a Who? Hello? Anyway. I could do a whole rant. I've made a difference. Michael Krawitz has made a difference. And because we know that it's possible, we encourage you to do the same. It is Canada Day. Happy Canada Day here on Time for Hemp. Thank you for tuning in and enjoying some of the silliness that we do and some of the seriousness that we take to heart and pass to you. And on the program today, my joint host and joint guest and joint friend. Anytime you hear the word joint on the big broadcast, nearly 2.5 million people all around the world pack their bongs, their pipes, their vaporizers, roll up their joints, and take time for hemp. Good morning, Michael. Wasn't that a groovy tune?
It was awesome. I really enjoyed it.
You know, I'm also excited about Toronto's mayor. He is just a killer. Rob Ford, he is back to work. He wants a second chance, which I love. Here's a guy who, when they said, did you do crack? He went, yeah. Did you smoke pot? Absolutely. And I even drink heavily. And then he comes back out very straightforward and says, you know, we all make a mistake. Hey, you know, some of it was not a mistake, some of it was, but I'm sober now. And like everybody else who goes through rehab, I deserve a second chance. And his popularity is zooming. It's kind of, maybe, is it because he's honest, do you think, that people find him so refreshing?
I'm going to have trouble commenting on that one.
Okay. Well, let's let you, I know you went and checked out some things today, what's going on up in Canada that you wanted to talk about, so let's cover those.
Well, I mean, my brain is still on Dr. Seuss. That was the reference you made earlier, wasn't it? Dr. Seuss story.
Horton Hears a Who? Yeah, remember everybody in town was screaming, "We're here, we're here, we're here." And that one little kid sat there and just defiantly said, "You don't need me. I'm not going to pay attention to it. I don't have nothing to do with this. It's all on you. It's all up to you." And they kept saying, "No, everybody has to yell and scream." And when they finally got a hold of him and got him up on the megaphone and he screamed, "I'm here," all of the people in Whoville were heard on the little flower that Horton held in his nose, and it was able to prove to other people around him that there was life there upon the dandelion that he held so gingerly in the tusk of his face.
As I sat there eating my green eggs and ham. So I wanted to finish telling you about what was going on in D.C. There was an appropriations rider introduced by Congressman Andy Harris, Republican, Maryland, on June 25th that could prevent the District of Columbia Board of Elections from using its funds to print the ballots that include Initiative 71. Worse, the policy rider may impede the District of Columbia's decriminalization of marijuana law set to take effect mid-July and prevent any changes to the district's medical marijuana program. So we got a real fight going on up in D.C. You can contrast that with the headline, which said that marijuana is moving forward despite Congress. So it could go either way. It really is quite interesting. We'll have to stay tuned and try to. One of these Fridays, we'll get Adam Eidinger on again, and we'll talk about what's going on after they find out how many signatures are valid there in D.C. But Casper, up in Canada, do you remember? I'm going to play a couple of the memory game here, but I wonder if you remember the constitutional challenge of Chris Clay, and it was a Osgood law professor named Alan Young who defended this guy Chris Clay. At the time, this was before Google, right? People can't even remember this time of the world anymore, I don't think. But back then, getting information, there was a handful of really good sources. DRCnet, the Media Awareness Project was just getting going, and there was this Chris Clay had this store called Hemp Nation, and he had a great website, and he put out news, and I got a lot of my news through his website. And the police, it was a great, really fascinating story, because the police were down the street trying to make like a crack buy. And they were trying to look casual. They thought they maybe had blown their cover, so they walked into a local store to look nonchalant. And the store they chose to walk into was Chris Clay's Hemp Nation store. And they're growing on the counter were hemp plants. They've been there for a while. It was just an open thing. That his store he sold all kinds of pipes and things and hemp things and food, snacks. And it was really way ahead of the curve. And the police went back to their unit and said, "Hey, there's got to be something we could do about this flagrant, a violation of the law." And they came in and they seized like $60,000 worth of his stuff and shut him down. But he didn't take it quietly. He challenged the constitutionality of the law that would stop a legitimate business owner like him from doing that, legitimate business, that he was doing with no complaints of any kind. He brought in all the experts. There was a professor that was originally in the Ladane Commission, and Professor Grinspoon went up there from the USA, and we brought in all the experts from all around the world to come in and speak, and that's all part of the record in the courts up in Canada. And about the same time, there was a case. Tell me if you remember this. Terrence Parker is an epilepsy patient up there in Canada, and he had to fight, I think, now 3 times in court and prove that he would suffer imminent harm if they refused him his access to marijuana, and he's won the right to his marijuana all these times. And I think his case and Chris Clay's case and other cases were all combined. And the courts issued a mandate to the government. They said, you have a certain amount of time. I forget what it was and when it was, but you can look it up. It's a matter of history now. But the courts gave the government of Canada a certain amount of time to come up with a reasonable access law for medical use, or they would throw out the whole law. and all marijuana would be legal. It was a really interesting little time period where the government was really scared. And what they came up with was this MMAR, Medical Marijuana Access Rules. And they gave everybody in Canada, the access through their doctor's orders to be able to grow their own, or you could sign up to get this cannabis from the government's program where they grew it by contract, and no one really liked the pot, and they ridiculed the fact that it was grown in a mine. It was called the Flin Flon mine. It was probably just an indoor grow room. There's probably not much bad about it other than it was crappy weed. And now the government of Canada has done another full switch, and now they've hired out a bunch of contracts to have professional growers grow really high-grade good cannabis and provide that to the patients. And on its face, you'd say, that's great. Except I'm reading a report saying that the patients aren't getting the cannabis, that they're paying the money, but they're not actually getting the cannabis. It's not working. So this is really, really a sad state of affairs up there. The people that, there were a few that fought really hard and got a waiver to be able to continue growing for a while. But eventually everyone's going to have to stop growing their own and buy cannabis from one of these suppliers. And the suppliers are being inundated. Check this out. Peace Naturals Project was reported in this one report that I'm reading on CBC News. And they talked about getting wiped out in seconds. Their whole supply that usually takes hours to get sold out in 30 seconds. They said 2.5 kilograms in under 30 seconds. They sold as their record.
Wow, I think that is a record.
So these poor folks up there are paying money in, but they're not getting the cannabis. And the government is saying, "Oh, there's no problem here." There plenty of availability. There's over 100 applications that have been filed, but only 13 suppliers at this point have licenses. And I like that number, 13. That's a number that comes up with marijuana all the time.
Yeah, it's the M is the 13th letter of the alphabet, and therefore M. Yeah, took me a minute to realize that because I kept seeing bikers with 13 tattooed on their arm. And the guy looked at me like I was an idiot. He said, "You've been in the marijuana movement how long, Casper? And you don't know that 13 stands for marijuana?" And I went, "Huh?" So yeah, I had to be educated.
Yeah, Health Canada moved from a cottage industry to an anticipated 50 larger companies. So they anticipated 50, and now they got so far 13. And they had like over 100 applications. But I guess they're dragging their feet and working on that as well.
Well, then other news from Canada you've got?
I work with an activist that we haven't talked to her about much, and I'll mention her name, and we'll have to see if we can get her on your show, maybe on a Friday, to talk to her about her activism and find out more. But Allison Murden, have you talked to her on the show?
I love Allison. She used to be a joint host a long time ago on the Time for Hemp Global broadcast when I was at American Freedom Radio. And then she got active in other areas there in Canada, and then we got busy, and we just kind of lost touch. But no, I adore Allison. She's a wonderful activist and has a lot to bring to the table.
Well, here you go. She's come full circle, because what she's doing is she and I are both patient advocates that are connected to the International Alliance for Cannabis as Medicine out of Germany as patient representatives for our region. Me in the United States are up in Canada. We have other patient advocate over in Europe, and it's really quite. I thought it was going to be something where basically I would go to a meeting and talk or something like that. But actually, that was the one thing I never have done. They really don't need me to come to the meetings and talk. But what's happened is I've actually helped this organization. Which is great. The IACM, if you're not really well familiar with them, they put out a lot of great documentation, a lot of documentation you've quoted even, maybe not even realize it comes through their channels. A lot of, science on cannabis as a medicine, what the meaning of legal access means. Some of the suicide rate numbers and stuff that we've gotten have come from studies that have been promoted through the IACM. And the IACM now, I've helped them connect to the international people over at the United Nations who are working on drug policy. And it's right at a critical time where the UN is forced to really listen and pay attention and understand, what it is that we're talking about. So here's this just perfect fit where IACM is a perfect, what they call a subject matter expert that we can insert into that process at the right time so that they can get good quality information. Versus, the last document that was published was a UNODC document that was published in cooperation with Kevin Sabet. And, Kevin Sabet may be a subject matter expert, but not on marijuana.
I could not believe his willingness to be so stupid publicly.
Kevin is an amazing individual. He's a little bit like a chameleon these days. Yeah, I guess you have to wait every couple of months and go and check him out and see what exactly his pitch is. His last thing is he's taken on the DPF. Remember when Drug Policy Alliance used to be called Drug Policy Foundation or DPF?
Right.
Well, that DPF was just kind of hanging around. Really, I never thought about it. I don't think anyone else did either. That's very useful real estate, DPF. It's got name recognition. Well, I guess he figured that out, and he come up with a name of his organization called Drug Policy Futures. And that's what he was handing out documentation at the UN under the organization heading Drug Policy Futures, DPF. Isn't that something?
You would think with all his money, he'd be able to come up with an original thought.
Well, he did. If you check out his wedding, it was like in Vanity Fair and stuff. Seriously, it was like one of these society weddings that they talk about forever. That's where his flair for individuality comes out, I think. His activism, I think, was really strong when he first started out because he started out with some good documentation that came from this society that was something his parents were part of, the Baha'i. And the Baha'i, if you study them, if you look at Baha'i, B-A-H-A-I, Baha'i, on the internet, you'll find there was a time period where they looked into drug policy. And they made all kinds of recommendations. They studied it. And then they moved on. If you look at what they're doing now, the last thing I looked at and studied them, they were working on like human trafficking and women's issues of, women being used as slaves and stuff, human slavery. Just really, they moved on, and they don't talk about drug policy. If they came back to drug policy today, they might have a whole different take. So he, when he ran out, when that Baha'i information kind of went out of style and it, is no longer useful, that's when he started, I think, this endless cycle of reinvention.
Well, we got just enough time for one more story out of Canada before we wrap it up.
Well, I'll tell you, Canada has come full circle. When we were working, initially on trying to just get our brains around mandatory minimums and all this stuff, Canada was the shining example of reform, of how good, you can effectuate reform. And there was, the crime rates were certainly better there than here, and their tolerance level was much higher there than here, and their use of force was so minimal compared to ours. It was a great example. And now it seems like we've almost come full circle, with Canada working towards mandatory minimums. And I feel so, I feel, same thing for the Netherlands, where the Netherlands government has come full circle, and you have to work so hard to defend the coffee shops, and it's just really sad that we have to go through these cycles of government when the public perception really hasn't changed any. The people of Canada are still just as cool as they ever were. And last thing I'll say is, are we going to get news soon about Mark Emery? When's his time to get released? And that,
I think it's about 5 months away. It's not much longer. I know. I couldn't believe how much time is flowing. I remember doing an interview with him and Ed Rosenthal and Eddie Lepp right before Eddie Lepp and Mark Emery were both incarcerated, and they were both on the show together at the same time. It was quite an historic show. We have it in the course in the archives at timeforhemp.com, and we've played it on the classics a few times. But yeah, time has gone by quickly. Mark's soon to be out. That rocks.
It does, and I tell you, he's not the kind of guy that's just going to go home and be quiet. I don't think.
No, they've already planned a tour, and they've already planned a handful of major events. So yeah,
well,
they're already anticipating a lot of activities that are grounded in being an activist.
Really, I don't know if I even want to try that one. That's a good tongue twister. But Jody Emery's been just really a force of nature out there on the trail of the cannabis expositions, talking about the truth of Mark and his story and the truth of cannabis. I just vicariously ran into her a couple of times on radio, and she would go on these radio stations that were so vehemently opposed to marijuana. I don't even know how you find such radio stations, but there they were, just attacking her, and she was so polite and so gracious and so eloquent, and I think that it's really nice to see them finally get back together. It'd be great.
It's easy to find radio stations that are anti-legalization. Just look at the radio stations that have corporate sponsors like Coca-Cola and Pepsi-Cola and Lay's potato chips and Standard Oil and Shell Oil. All those people donate to a partnership for drug-free America. It's part of their budget each year. And and they also agree with piss testing, and they support the police and blah, blah, blah. So those are the sellouts.
Well, they're talking on the Steve Dank show there. They were talking about a political party where to be a candidate, you had to pass a drug test and have a minimum THC level.
Well, it's interesting because of the laws that have been rewritten here recently in England. It's worse than here in America. You can't have bank accounts with that even with an organization that promotes ending prohibition. If you're a magazine that has pictures of marijuana buds in it, they close your bank account and they won't let you do business, and they're trying to censor the message. And the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network is, as Steve calls it, their new pirate radio station that England cannot shut off.
That is cool as hell, and I hadn't even realized that.
And that's true in a lot of countries. We are a radio network that broadcasts the truth that cannot be shut off. And it frustrates the authorities around the world because they can no longer sit there and lie to the people in their jurisdiction.
And we have a pretty good memory.
Yep, we sure do. Well, we're down to the last 4 minutes. This gives you a great opportunity to promote Mary Lynn and Al and your show and any events and URLs that you want to.
Well, I was just going to say, I don't think people have mentioned Chris Clay or Alan Young from Osgood Law in quite a while. These folks are out there living their lives, being quiet, and they don't want to be bothered. And we just want them to know we love them.
Maybe we should have them back on the show sometime.
Yeah, bother him and get him back on the show. But I think Al and Mary Lynn wouldn't mind being bothered. Patients at a Time, medicalcannabis.com, and I'm Veterans for Medical Cannabis Access, VMCA. On Facebook, it's usa.vmca, and IACM, the International Alliance for Cannabis Medicine, is easily found on Facebook. Google by typing in the International Alliance for Cannabis as Medicine. It'd be too hard for me to try to tell you the website. And the time of our show, we're going to be on next Friday, you and I, on Small Town Fridays, and then the next show that I have is this coming Sunday with the Cannabis Museum Radio Hour. And I've really had a blast with these shows. I really enjoy it. So thank you so much.
And I need to remind people that this Friday is the 4th of July, so we will be broadcasting an encore presentation.
Yep.
And Sunday is 4th of July weekend, so we will be broadcasting an encore presentation of all of our programming. And we will be live. Is today Thursday?
Today is Tuesday.
Oh, okay. Dang nabbit. We are live Wednesday and Thursday. We're off Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, and back on Monday.
There you go. So you'll see me a week from Sunday with the International Cannabis Report, and that Friday with Small Town Friday.
There you go. Because, I don't take many days off.
No, you don't.
But, celebrating our independence from the mother country and our Declaration of Independence and our Constitution and our Bill of Rights and the freedoms that was written into law by our founding fathers, to me, is worthy of taking a day off to celebrate with friends and to salute the flag and to embrace our freedoms and to dance and sing and rejoice out loud in the ways that we are able to do so because of those freedoms.
I think dancing to the gunfire over in Guam when I was stationed over there in the Air Force was probably the most exciting 4th of July that I've had. But it's nice to have the day off.
Well, that's the other aspect of it. You and I and so many others are also members or former members of our armed forces, and we can honestly say that we gave our lives to our country's abilities to enjoy these freedoms.
That's true, and they come with a cost, and the cost is writing a letter to your congressman, to your editor of your newspaper, and talking to your family members, friends, neighbors, and associates about the truth. And where do you get the truth, Casper?
At timeforhemp.com from the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. Thank you for the shameless plug. I want to let you know, too, Muck Sticky is bringing his creativity to our network and is going to be doing a show on the big broadcasting network here in another couple of weeks. Joe Grumbine has finally set a date to start his show. It will be the 14th here on the Time for Hemp Global Broadcasting Network. Tomorrow morning,
Kelly Kriston. We'll catch him after the holiday.
That's right. Tomorrow morning, we start the Japanese broadcast here on the network. So that's exciting. And let's see, we got another show coming, and then we got, of course, Doug McVeigh's new to our network.
Yep.
And we've also just started having Kevin Zeese, his broadcast on our network. And I just sat down and figured out the broadcasting schedule for a third show. I can't remember what it is, but we are adding new programming left and right. And I want to make sure that everybody knows to share us with your friends.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, Michael, any closing words before we start the music?
Well, I'll tell you, since you mentioned Kevin Zeese and Doug McVeigh coming on board, that's a powerhouse there. I mean, that we're really entering into the information age. You can count on them covering some ground and pulling us in some new direction. Opening our minds to some new thoughts and ideas, I'm sure.
All right. Well, Steve Danks has let me know that he's hanging around and he's waiting to start his broadcast. And
much love, Steve.
Yeah, he is from England, and he's broadcasting there. So we are the pirate radio to his neck of the woods, so we're going to get on with that. Thank you to everybody for tuning in. Thank you, Michael, for being on the program today. We love you, Kelly, and all of our friends up in Canada. And remember, the next time you hear me, you'll know that it's time for hemp.
Look at all that money, yeah, the money that they spent. Take another look and spend some time for him. Don't cut trees for paper, cause it hurts the environment. Stop deforestation, yes, it's time for him. Whoa, an acre of hemp makes 20 bales of oil. No need for pesticides to poison